I want to be clear. I have not faked this. This is the genuine reaction from SpaceX when the Starship blew up. Oddly enough, late night TV found it funny, but for somewhat different reasons.
Here's what SpaceX called a rapid unscheduled disassembly, which it's the same thing that happened to Twitter when Elon Musk took over it.
Operate and, Houston, we have a metaphor for Twitter.
My reaction? Well, I wasn't cheering. It was more like, so they finally launched it. Weren't they meant to be landing a couple of these on Mars last year?
That's not a typo.
And that's not just 2 launches to confirm there was water on Mars, to identify hazards, place power, mining. Wow, they're really planning this out in detail. Support infrastructure for future flights. It wasn't just 2 launches they needed for that.
Send the spaceship up to orbit, you retank it or refill it until it has full tanks.
So for each one that goes to Mars requires basically 5 launches. They were going to be launching 10 of them in 2022. And in 2024, they would double that to 20 to actually send people to Mars. No, really. Elon Musk was going to get boots on the ground on Mars in 2024. Now, a lot of people did a lot of work on this. While Musk was off picking fights on Twitter over paying $8 or something. But it's still quite impressive what they've achieved. But you've got to temper this with, yes, this was mostly done with taxpayer money. And Musk's only real achievement on this was to set SpaceX on a course for bankruptcy. With the vaporware claim. Which brings us on to Elon Musk's reaction. I mean, he must be overjoyed at this brilliant success rate. Just think of all the valuable data they're going to get from this flight. Nope. He looks like a man who's just Thelma and Louise the company. And for fairly good reason. Now at this point, 1 million raging Musk fans will cry out in pain about how much I must hate mankind and progress for criticizing Elon Musk. Well guys, why are you mad at me? I'm not the one who said that the car could make it to Mars if we just believe hard enough. And I've got more bad news for you. It's really not me saying SpaceX is screwed. It's Elon Musk. This is what Elon Musk said about SpaceX in 2021 in a leaked email. The consequences for SpaceX if we cannot get enough reliable Raptors is we can't fly Starship, which means we can't fly Starlink satellites version 2. Falcon has neither the volume nor the mass to orbit needed for satellite version 2. Satellite V1 by itself is financially weak, while V2 is strong. Oh boy, is there a lot to dig into there. What? Starlink is commercially unviable as is. Oh, if only someone could have seen it coming. Even with all that government subsidy, it's still not viable. What it comes down to is that we face a genuine risk of bankruptcy if we can't achieve a Starship flight rate of at least once every 2 weeks next year. And they didn't quite make their goal of a flight every 2 weeks in 2022. In fact, they didn't make any flights in 2022. And here we are in 2023, and they did make a test flight. It didn't quite go so well. So according to Musk himself, the entire viability of SpaceX as a company was tied to making Starlink a viable business. And this required an all or nothing roll of the dice on getting Starship flying once every 2 weeks in 2022. Yeah, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. Meanwhile, how is Starlink currently doing? Well, currently it gets very mediocre ratings, 3 stars from Tom's Hardware and Forbes. And that's after they were given $1 billion or so by the US taxpayer to try and make Starlink work. And they failed to get a handout from the government of another billion or so dollars of subsidy because the service that they delivered wasn't up to scratch. And as for me hating progress, what progress? Back before I was even born, they were making rockets like, well, not exactly. The rockets they made before I was born actually worked. You know, first time, every time. Like the Saturn V. 13 attempted launches, 13 successes. And in the 1970s, NASA had a saying, failure is not an option. Scroll the clock forward 50 or so years, and the guy NASA has contracted to make America's next lunar lander has a saying that success is not blowing up on the pad. And I gotta be honest, the thing that I find funniest about this clip is watching a Musk fan collide with reality. For years, I had to put up with simps like this telling me it was personally Musk who had revolutionized the rocket industry and how he really was going to land men on Mars in 2024. This was, of course, before he bought Twitter and it became obvious to everyone that he was an idiot. But it's just hilarious watching a fangirl get utterly crushed by the chasm between the tech god she believes that Elon Musk is and the sort of questions he should be answering, and the pathetic dregs of reality when Musk starts comparing SpaceX's rocketry skills to a failed Soviet-era rocket from the 1960s.
Hey, Elon, first of all, thanks for hosting this space. This is really great. And I was just curious, in the midterm, what is the priority with Starship? To develop and demonstrate refueling capability, work on the HLS variant, or are you just in general still proving the concept?
No, I think I'm just like I said, I really want to lower expectations as much as possible here, and use as an example the Soviet N1. That's why I prefaced it by saying that the Soviet rocket engineers, which really was the entire Warsaw Pact, frankly.
Yes, this is Elon Musk comparing his revolutionary rocket to something designed in the Soviet Union with slide rules.
Their combined capabilities still resulted in failure despite maximum motivation, and they were the A team. So just please set your expectations appropriately. That is what success is not what should be expected tomorrow. That would be insane.
Spinning, but I do want to remind everyone that everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
And I'd like to remind everyone, that would be a perfectly valid thing to say in the 1950s, when people really struggled to build working rockets. It's not the 1950s anymore.
4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a slight difference in tone here.
Everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
What is the priority with Starship? To develop and demonstrate refueling capability, work on the HLS variant, or are you just in general still proving the concept?
Success is not what should be expected tomorrow. That would be insane.
Yeah, also from the 60s and designed with slide rules, and yet somehow they did expect success. But Starship was revolutionary, right? It was going to be fully and rapidly reusable.
With Starship, we're aiming for full and rapid reusability.
Wow, that's almost exactly what they said about the Falcon 9 about a decade ago.
I'm so excited to sell the operators here a launch vehicle where really the only cost associated with that vehicle, the non-recurring, the initial investment in the stages themselves, but the cost of fuel and the mission operations. So if we get this right, and we're trying really hard to get this right, we're looking at launches to be in the $5 to $7 million range.
Cool. So if reusability works out, launches will be in the $5 to $7 million range. And if it doesn't, then they'll be the same as the non-reusable rockets in the $50 to $60 million range. And launches are currently $50 to $60 million.
So if we get this right, and we're trying really hard to get this right, we're looking at launches to be in the $5 to $7 million range.
And so looking forward, reusability, we don't believe it really counts unless you can turn it around as rapidly or almost as rapidly as you turn around an aircraft. Basically you land the system, you land the stage, you do some brief but important critical checks and inspections, you refuel and you re-go.
So even after a decade, the Falcon 9, even according to SpaceX themselves, doesn't count as a reusable rocket.
So our challenge right now is to refly a rocket within 24 hours. So that's when we'll really feel like we got the reusability piece right.
Spoiler, that never happened. Their fastest reuse was somewhat under a month. So really, when SpaceX promises that they're going to make something 100 times cheaper and 100 times faster, let's just keep this into perspective that they couldn't do it after 10 years of working on a rocket where it would have been 10 times easier to achieve that sort of goal. Or, as Musk said in 2022,
with Starship, we're aiming for full and rapid reusability. So, we obviously need to accomplish that. That's not done yet, but the success is one of the possible outcomes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. There's definitely a very slim chance we'll survive.
And let's just mix one little extra fact in there. Well, it's kind of hard to have a reusable rocket if your engines keep blowing up. And for the Musk fans out there, he is not exactly being subtle about the problem.
Like really, they're like the two things that occupy the most number of mental cycles are Raptor 2 and Tesla Full Self-Driving.
Yeah, this was clearly before he devoted 100% of his mental cycles to being the full-time switchboard operator at Twitter. No, but before then, he worked on the rocket engine and full self-driving. The full self-driving, which still doesn't work about 10 years after he claimed it would be ready next year. In fact, history has shown that whenever Musk says, "I think we're pretty close," it actually means that they're nowhere near. They don't have a clue how to solve this.
The only remaining issue that we're aware of is melting the chamber. So that thing really wants to melt, and we're just trying to get the exact sort of balance between head end foam cooling and throat foam cooling to not melt the chamber. I think we're pretty close. Like we have a couple engines in the stand that have I think 700 or 800 seconds of operation and several start cycles.
So whatever, let's take that as the average failure point of about 1,000 seconds of burn time. After all, those are the best engines they have in their stand, and they only have 2 of them. Burn time for all of the engines on the boosters is about 5,000 seconds, so you would expect about 5 engines to fail. Yeah. And this is about a year before the launch in 2022, after about 5 years of engine development. And you don't have a reliable engine, you don't have a rocket. Engine reliability is everything, especially if you have 30 or so engines on your rocket. And bear in mind, this is at the event where Musk is boasting about how reliable they've made their engine.
I mean, it is essential, obviously, to making Starship work.
Not that I would put too much stock in that Musk has a history of faking demos like this. Like his completely fake solar roof demo, or his full self-driving demo of 2016. Or his completely fake nuclear bomb-proof...
And this is the feature I like best. Thermonuclear explosion-proof glass. There you see, look, nothing. Survived a nuclear explosion. That was incredible.
Until, of course, 2 years later, when they do a demo of the same glass being used on the Cybertruck, it just wasn't quite as successful.
Sure? Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, it didn't go through. So that's a plus side.
Let's try the right.
Try that one, really? Okay. Sure.
Oh, man.
It didn't go through. All right.
Now you might be thinking that, yes, SpaceX can make one of these engines per day.
It's the highest chamber pressure engine ever done operationally. By any standard, the most advanced engine ever made.
And how quickly can you turn out one of these?
We make them one a day.
Which means it would only take them another month or so to make another booster with this sort of reliability. Yeah, I would have thought it might be more important to sort out the reliability issues rather than making lots of engines that are good at destroying rockets. And in 2019, Musk was saying that they cost more than $2 million a pop, meaning this was about $60 million of engines alone. And when he says more than $2 million per engine, given that usually with Musk you just add a zero on to whatever he's saying, well, fine, let's just call him $10 million per pop per engine. So this test is about $350 million in engines alone, which also tracks really quite well with what Musk was saying before they'd even built the booster as to how big a loss the loss of the booster would be.
Hopefully we don't lose it. Hopefully we don't lose any boosters because that's a lot of engines. Our initial booster flights will just have maybe 2 to 4 engines, not 28. 28 is a lot of engines.
And what did they learn from the loss of the first booster? Well, that they really hadn't sorted out the reliability issue yet. Or in the absolute best case scenario, where the engines were damaged by the lack of a flame diverter, which personally I don't, in that you watch the odd green flash as the rocket engines melt, or the puffs as they explode. But even in that best case scenario, they blew up some $300 million, mostly of taxpayers' money, to find out something that Soviets with slide rules worked out some 60 years ago, that flame diverters on big rockets are important. And you only have to look at how much damage was done to the launch site. So the three things we're going to be looking at here are, first of all, how far away the rocket is, this car, and this palm tree. So seconds after ignition, you've got to zoom in on this car. Now that car has a pretty bad day. Yeah, not quite sure what the insurance claim on that one's going to look like. So the car had a pretty bad time. Meanwhile, what about the palm tree? Well, I don't think palm trees have insurance, but yeah, it was a bad day for the palm tree as well. Then you realize this is actually quite a long way from the launch pad, and the actual tanks used for fueling the rocket are here. They've completely trashed the launch site. You're probably looking at over a year before you can do anything here again. With this Twitter commentator pretty much hitting the nail on the head with a picture of the crater below the launch pad. This was rocket science before your grandparents had a color TV. Now it's incompetence, which is true enough. But oddly, for the actual program as a whole, this might not be so bad, in that if they don't have a reliable engine, they don't have a program. And this gives them maybe another year to try and sort out the problems with the engine that they've not managed to sort out in the last half decade or so. But it does, of course, require that SpaceX doesn't go broke in the meantime. But Musk's response was, of course, we'll be ready to go in another month or so. And remember what I was saying about just adding a zero onto how long between what Musk predicts it'll take and what it actually takes. In February of 2022, Musk was saying that they expect to get regulatory approval and the vehicle ready to launch in a month or two.
If you were to get some kind of approval from the FAA in March, would you be looking at, how quickly could the hardware be ready to go?
So right now, I think we're tracking to have the regulatory approval and hardware readiness around the same time. Yeah, around the same. Hopefully, basically a couple months for both.
And of course, in reality, it took over a year. So quick summary. SpaceX as an independent company is basically circling the drain, having bet the whole company on being able to make Starlink profitable, which is completely dependent on getting a Starship launch every 2 or so weeks last year. Now, as a government contractor, they've probably blown through $1 billion or so of the $3 billion or so that the government is giving them, with the first manned mission meant to be in 2025.
NASA has chosen SpaceX to return us to the moon. I am so excited to partner with SpaceX in this fantastic endeavor for the Artemis suite of missions. So now that we've selected our partner, and for the next phase going forward, we have to make sure that the testing occurs, because we're not going to launch humans until we have a successful test. So we will be working to make sure that the design and everything that we have going forward so far is ready to go.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. Now, someone's bound to say, but Musk is worth billions. He can easily take a loss like this. I'll link you to a video here explaining why he really can't. The quick version is Musk doesn't have a bank account with $100 billion in it, any more than Elizabeth Holmes had a bank account with $5 billion in it.
The company that she started at 19 is valued at $9 billion. You own over 50% of it, right? Congratulations on that.
Forbes magazine has downgraded the net worth of Elizabeth Holmes from $4.5 billion to nothing.
She's heading to jail now for making full self-driving style optimistic timeline promises.
Overwhelming focus is solving full self-driving. So, yeah. And that's essential. And like that's really the difference between Tesla being worth a lot of money and being worth basically zero.
As for me, well, I first smelled a rat with the Hyperloop.
I swear it's not that hard.
And of course, I got a lot of pushback at the time from that. And yes, damn straight, I was right on it from the very beginning. SpaceX I was skeptical about for a long time, but when they started claiming that they were going to fly rockets like planes, yeah, that's when I knew it was bullshit. Naturally, at the time, I got a lot of pushback from folks saying that, no, I just hated Musk and wanted him to fail. Well, here we are, some 6 years on. Musk was meant to be landing on Mars last year. If we actually had a progress bar for getting to Mars, Musk has maybe, after 6 years, hit the 1% mark.
When do you think SpaceX will land a human being on Mars?
And I want to stress, this is completely uncut. I've not stretched this out. I've not doubled any of the segments. This is genuinely Elon Musk's pause to try to appear like he's actually thinking about the question.
Best case is about 5 years. Worst case, 10 years.
And if you think that's fantastic and amazing, good for you. But it's still operationally insignificant in terms of getting to Mars. And it's also notable that Musk has shifted from dewy-eyed optimism about getting to Mars.
I mean, in order to make it appealing and increase that portion of the Venn diagram of people who actually want to go, it's got to be really fun and exciting, and it can't feel cramped or boring. So the crew compartment or the occupant compartment is set up so that you can do zero-G games.
Yeah, it took 6 years from going from our crew compartment is set up such that you can do zero-G games to this.
Success is not what should be expected tomorrow. That would be insane.
Games you can float around. There'll be like movies, lecture halls, cabins, a restaurant. It'll be like really fun.
To something a little more grounded and realistic, which basically kills the entire business venture dead, irrespective of whether he could get any of it to work or not.
And it can't feel cramped or boring. So it can't feel cramped or...
Get ready for a surprise!
The sales pitch for going to Mars is that it's going to be cramped. Occupant compartment is set up so that you can do zero-G games, you can float around. There'll be like movies, lecture halls, dangerous, difficult, very hard work. And like I said, I'm an optimist.
Success is not what should be expected tomorrow. That would be insane.
And like I said, I'm an optimist. You might die, and that's the sales pitch. Cabins, a restaurant. It'll be like really fun.
Smithers, I'm beginning to think that Homer Simpson was not the brilliant tactician I thought he was.
Now, the number of channels calling out this bullshit is exceptionally limited, with the Common Sense Skeptic and Adam Something being two other channels that provide good media on this sort of stuff. The sad thing is that Musk fans make up 90% of the media in this arena. I mean, you try and find another video like this on SpaceX, and it would be like trying to find another video critical of the Hyperloop 10 years ago. And their most common criticism of me is that I'm just doing it for the clicks and the money, which is possibly the dumbest criticism of all time, in that if I was in it for the clicks or money, I would go with the flow and join the bullshit spouting brigade. It would be far quicker and more profitable to ignore the whole well-researched fact things and simply gush praise on Musk. But fine, if you want to go down this route, my well-researched videos are supported by donations to this channel. There you go, fine, I make money off these videos. And on the track record, where are we, boys? Where is the Hyperloop, the super fast tunnels under all the cities with automated pods traveling 150 miles an hour? Where is the full self-driving, the Earth-to-Earth transport, the Mars landing, the Tesla bots, the electric trucks that beat rail? Yet the Tesla fanboys may have the joy of the more popular channels. Whereas all I and the people who support this channel have is that we correctly clocked Elon Musk as a bullshit artist 10 years before anyone else.